It was just an ordinary day at the local park for 12-year-old Jada, a bright, full-of-life African-American girl with a smile that could light up the room. As she walked alongside her mother, she felt the warmth of the sun on her skin, a peaceful moment in an otherwise hectic week. Jada loved days like this. Nothing too fancy, just her and her mom enjoying some quiet time in the fresh air. Little did she know her day was about to take an unimaginable turn. As they approached the park exit, a police car pulled up beside them. Out stepped Officer Daniels, a man whose cold expression seemed out of place in a family-friendly park. Jada's mother, Sophia, could tell immediately that something was wrong. But before she could even speak, Officer Daniels ordered Jada to stop. "What's going on, officer?" Sophia asked, her voice laced with concern. "Your daughter is being detained," Daniels said, his voice sharp and dismissive. "We have reason to believe she is causing a disturbance." Sophia was stunned. She glanced around. The park was bustling with families, children playing and people enjoying a calm afternoon. Jada? A disturbance? It didn't make sense. Jada had been nothing but polite, yet there he was, a figure of authority, giving orders that she didn't understand. "Officer, you're making a mistake," Sophia pleaded. "My daughter has done nothing wrong." But Daniels wasn't listening. Without warning, he grabbed Jada by the arm, pulling her towards the squad car with an almost hostile grip. "Let go of my daughter!" Sophia cried, rushing forward. But it was too late. Daniels was already pulling Jada's hair out of its neat braids, the white officer's fingers twisting through her dark, curly locks. Jada winced in pain, trying to pull away, but the officer's grip only tightened. He was doing this for no reason, at least no reason that Sophia could fathom. And in that moment she felt an overwhelming sense of fear, not just for herself, but for her daughter. But then the unthinkable happened. Daniels, in a burst of arrogance and cruelty, pulled out a set of clippers from his belt. "You think you can hide from me?" he sneered. "Let's see how much attitude you have when you look like the rest of these kids." Without another word, he brought the clippers to Jada's hair, shaving off her beautiful braids, one strand at a time. Jada cried out, but the officer didn't stop. The sound of the clippers buzzing in her ears echoed louder than her own heartbeat. Sophia stood there, frozen with disbelief, unable to stop the assault on her daughter. The pain was unbearable. Not just the physical pain of Jada's hair being cut against her will, but the pain of seeing her daughter humiliated in front of strangers. It wasn't just a haircut. It was a public show of power. The officer was making a statement. He was using his badge, his authority, and his position to show that, in his eyes, no one, especially someone like Jada, was beyond control. And as the last lock of hair fell to the ground, something changed in Sophia. She had been quiet, trembling, but now she saw it. She saw what this cop thought he could get away with, and she knew she could not let it stand. The air in the park had grown heavy, like a storm was about to break. Officer Daniels stood there looking down at Jada, his clippers in hand, the last bits of her hair scattered around her. He hadn't expected her mother to react like this. "Look what you've done," Sophia said, her voice shaking with fury. Her hands were balled into fists at her sides, but she could feel the tears welling up. Her daughter, once proud of her braids, now stood in front of her with a bald patch, stripped of her pride, stripped of her identity. But it wasn't just the humiliation, it was the systemic injustice that was happening right in front of her eyes. Officer Daniels hadn't just wronged her daughter. He had insulted every black woman who had fought to wear her natural hair with pride. And now, in front of the onlookers who had gathered in confusion and fear, Jada was a symbol of everything that was wrong. Sophia took a deep breath, her instincts kicking in. She needed to stay calm, but it was difficult. She reached for her phone in her pocket, dialing the number she had hoped she would never have to call. "Get here now," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. It's happening. Meanwhile, the crowd had grown larger, whispers spreading like wildfire through the onlookers. The street had turned into a stage, with a mother fighting to protect her child against an officer who had overstepped his bounds. Most stood still, unsure of what to do, but some were recording. It was clear that what was happening wasn't right, and the viral moment had just begun. Jada, still reeling from the shock, had fallen silent. Her hands were trembling as she tried to brush away the fallen strands of hair from her face. She had lost her dignity in front of the world, but what she didn't realize yet was that something else was about to unfold, something she would never forget. Within minutes, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the tense atmosphere. Sophia's phone had not only reached the right person, it had reached the one who could turn everything around. The black SUVs screeched to a halt, and from them stepped a figure Sophia recognized instantly. Special Agent Michael Williams, the head of the FBI. He was tall, his face stern but not cold. He had a presence about him, one that commanded respect without saying a word. Behind him, a team of FBI agents emerged, their eyes scanning the scene. Jada looked up, her eyes wide. She didn't fully understand what was going on, but when she saw the suited men approach, her mother's expression softened just a little. She knew it would be okay. Agent Williams walked straight toward Officer Daniels, who had barely noticed his arrival. The sight of an FBI chief coming to stand beside the mother of the young girl seemed to freeze time. "I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the child," Agent Williams said, his voice firm but calm. Daniels, who was still in his uniform, looked up, unprepared for the situation. "This is an ongoing investigation," he said defensively, his hand still resting on Jada's arm. Agent Williams didn't flinch. "You've crossed a line," he said quietly, "and you're going to pay for it." The crowd watched as the FBI chief turned his attention to the other officers. His presence now a weight the entire scene seemed to shift under. Daniels's confidence began to falter, and he took a step back as Agent Williams's team began taking over the situation. They pulled Daniels aside, handcuffing him with the same cold efficiency that he had used to subdue Jada. But the scene was far from over. As Daniels was taken away, the cameras and bystanders were already documenting everything. What had started as a random act of racial aggression was now an unforgettable moment of public accountability. And for Jada and her mother, the end of the nightmare was only just beginning. Sophia reached out to her daughter, who stood with her head down. "Jada," she said softly, "you're safe now." The officers around them made way for the chief of police, a tall, composed man who approached with a briefcase in hand. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said. "This shouldn't have happened. Your daughter is a victim of an abuse of power, and we're going to make sure this officer is held accountable." Jada looked up at her mother, her eyes still wide but beginning to calm. It wasn't the world she wanted to live in, but it was the world she had to navigate. And in that moment, she knew that while the scars might stay, she wasn't alone in facing them. Later, a statement was released by the FBI chief calling for an investigation into the officer's actions. The news spread across the media, sparking conversations on social justice, racial inequality, and police misconduct. But for Jada and her family, it was a small victory, a symbol of hope, in a system that had long let them down. And just as quickly as the storm had come, it was over. But for Officer Daniels, the echoes of that moment would reverberate.